How to evaluate algebraic expressions? Let's find out. Hello everyone and welcome to the mythical world of math. My name is Zach and today we're going to be talking about how to evaluate algebraic expressions by hand. I'm going to do a second video showing you how to evaluate those expressions using the online calculator Desmos, so let's get to it. So the first thing that we have to do when figuring out how to evaluate an algebraic expression is we need to be able to identify all the variables that are in the expression and the values that we're going to be using in place of those variables. So if you look at the first example here, you'll notice that we have two variables, x and y. So what that means is that we have to have a value for both x and y to plug in order to actually evaluate this expression. Let's say that the problem states that x equals 2 and y equals 4. So what this means is that we're going to substitute the values of 2 and 4 in place of the variables x and y respectively. All right, 2 goes in place of x, 4 goes in place of y. So when we plug it in, it's going to look like this. But the next thing that we have to do is we have to figure out the order in which we actually evaluate this expression. All right, so let's take a little side trip real quick and let's talk about order of operations. All right, most of you have probably heard of this expression before, or you've heard of what's called PEMDAS. Okay, PEMDAS. All right, this acronym actually tells us the order in which we evaluate operations in math. Okay, it's an acronym, so every letter stands for a different word. P stands for parentheses, E is for exponents, M is for multiplication, D is for division, and A and S are for addition and subtraction. So that's the order that we perform operations in math. We start with the parentheses, then any exponents, then multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. There's one small caveat though when we're talking about multiplication and division and addition and subtraction. Okay? When you have an expression that has just multiplication and division, you don't actually do it in order of multiplication has to be first, division has to be second. If multiplication and division are next to each other in an expression, you actually perform the operations in order from left to right. And that works the same way with addition and subtraction. If you have addition and subtraction next to each other, you actually perform those operations in order left to right. I'll show you an example of what I mean later on, talking about the multiplication, division, and addition and subtraction. But first, let's go ahead and go back to our previous example now that we understand the order in which these operations have to occur. All right. So after we plug in the 2 and the 4 for x and y, okay, we've got 5 times 2 minus 2 times 4. All right. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to do the 5 times 2 first, which is 10, and the 2 times 4, which is 8. Okay, so what that gives us is 10 minus 8, which is 2. If you do that in a different order, you'll get the wrong answer. It's very important that you understand that that multiplication has to happen before you do any of that subtraction. All right, the subtraction is the last thing that we do in the problem. So let's try one more example, and this time let's make it a little bit more difficult, and let's talk about those scenarios of what happens when multiplication, division, and addition and subtraction are next to each other. All right. So in this example, you'll see it says, let x equal negative 3, y equals 5, and z equals positive 3. Okay, so we're going to evaluate the expression. And again, evaluating means taking those values, plugging them in, and then simplifying it down to an answer. All right. So what we have is we have x divided by z times y minus x plus 2y. All right, so there's a lot of variables here. They're being reused multiple times. We still plug in those values every time we see an x, y, and z. All right, so when we actually plug them in, this is what it looks like. Now you'll notice there's something a little bit different here, and that's the parentheses around negative numbers. It's a good practice to always plug in parentheses around negative numbers. All right, that way you separate the negative number from any other operation that's in front of the number. All right, so you don't want it to look like plus minus 3. By putting that parentheses there, you can actually see that it's minus a negative 3. All right, so it just helps keep that separation, helps make it a little bit cleaner. So the order in which we perform these operations, we're going to start with the division first, because if you'll notice, there's division and multiplication right next to each other, all right? But we're going to do it in order from left to right. So we're actually going to do -3 divided by 3 first, which gives us -1, okay, if you'll see here. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do the multiplication, all right? So that's -1 times 5. And because there's multiplication all the way at the end, we can actually do that at the same time, because when we do that, it doesn't have an effect on anything else. So we can actually do that multiplication at the same time. So now that gives us -5 minus -3 plus 10. Now, here's where you kind of need to go back and remember that when you subtract a negative, that's actually the same thing as adding a positive, okay? So that -5 minus -3 actually turns into -5 plus 3 plus 10. All right, if we go ahead and do that out, we get 8. All right, so you'll see how order of operations got us to the final answer. If you did any of this in the wrong order, you will have gotten a wrong answer. Okay, the only answer that's acceptable is 8. If you had, say, done the multiplication first, then the division, you actually would have ended up with a fraction in your answer, which is obviously not the case. All right, so it's very important that you understand left to right when doing that multiplication and division. I hope this video better helped you understand how to evaluate expressions by hand. Don't forget, I'll put up a second video that shows you how to evaluate expressions using Desmos, an online calculator. If this video did help you, please be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.